welcome back to the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast, where we explore elements of today's fire service. This podcast is for Metro Chiefs by Metro Chiefs, engaging in conversations about challenges and opportunities that matter most to the leaders in our association. While this series is created with Metro members in mind, the topics we explore are just as relevant to current or aspiring fire chiefs and departments of any size across the U.S. and, as we'll see today, around the world. I'm your host, Alec Otten, and today I have the privilege of sitting down with a fellow member of the Metro Chiefs and one who likely travels the furthest to join us at the conference. So it's always good to see you. With us today is Fire Chief Bert Brugghemans of the Antwerp Fire Brigade in Belgium. It's great to see you. Chief Brugghemans is the Chief Fire Officer, or Zone Commander, I think they're called, of the Antwerp Fire Brigade, which serves one of Europe's busiest ports and also a major urban center. He's been leading Antwerp's fire and emergency services since 2017, and I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes that might feel like dog years, right? 7 for everyone. He is a seasoned public sector leader and holds a multidisciplinary background in crisis management, public health, strategic decision-making, and public administration. He's a vocal advocate for integrating smart technology such as drones and data analytics across fire operations, especially in the port and industrial zones. Under his leadership, the Antwerp Fire Brigade has strengthened collaboration with regional and European partners. Chief Brugghemans actively participates in officer development programs like the one offered by the Federation of European Fire Officers. He also contributes to the Metro Chiefs and groundbreaking events, I would say, like the World Fire Congress. In 2021, Chief Brugghemans was honored as Belgian Public Leader of the Year. But that's not like a tough one to get, huh?
No,
he emphasizes rigorous training and high recruitment standards and interzone cooperation when stating we are going towards danger while everyone else is running away from it. Chief, it's an honor to have you with us today. Is there anything I missed in the introduction that you would like our listeners to know about you?
I think your summary of my career was rather extensive and very complete. So thank you very much for that. It's always funny to hear somebody else talking about your career while you're just in it and just going along with the flow. So that's a nice overview. Thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for having me here.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I think we were talking before we started recording about how interesting I think this topic really is. We get very myopic in the U.S., right? A lot of times we think we're the only game in town, and we fail to recognize that for hundreds of years before we ever came into existence, our European brothers and sisters were tackling the problem of fires. But we do it with some similarities and with quite a few differences. And so one of the things I think is different for our organizations is really the pathway to the industry, and or at least that's my bias or assumption. So can you tell us a little bit about your career path, your current role, and give us an overview of how people come into this industry and specifically how you came into the industry?
Okay. So my story, of course, will be the one from Belgium. And in Europe, we have a lot of countries, a lot of similarities between the countries, but also a lot of differences. So a lot of times I will refer to the Belgian situation. I will try to make some connections to other countries, just to make clear that some of the things are very similar in Europe, but some things are also very different in Europe. But to answer your question, my own career path, I started as a voluntary firefighter when I was 18 years old. Like a lot of us, I think, when I was 18, I was wondering what can I do for my community. And, becoming a firefighter just looked cool and fun to do. So together with 2 or 3 friends, we decided to join the fire service. And that's where my whole story started. I became a voluntary firefighter. When I went to college, I stayed active as a firefighter, even though I was studying in another city. But when I came home, I was still active with the fire service. And then at a certain moment when I graduated and I worked for a year at the university, and I was sitting at the desk and I was wondering, what do I really want to do? And I wanted to do something with my study, be
Under
a
his
manager, leading people and so on. But I also wanted to do something that was fun and active and not all the time behind the desk. And so I thought, why not make a career out of this firefighting? And then I think there's a major difference between what we do and other countries, some other countries. It depends. We have a career path where you can become a fire officer, like a chief, directly if you have a master's degree. And that was in my case, it was like that. And there was an opening in Antwerp to become a fire officer. So not go through the basic ranks, but just become a fire officer based on this master's degree. And so I applied for the job. We were with I think 50 candidates. And so 3 of us got the job in the end, and that's where I started my career as a fire officer. So on the one hand, I was still a voluntary firefighter, so a basic firefighter in my hometown, and next to that, I became a fire officer, or you can call it a chief in the US, in Antwerp. And that for me was a very important moment, because then I knew from the first day that this was the job of my life. The moment that you are working in such a metropolitan area together with the industrial site, the port of Antwerp, where you have very different risks. Yeah, that was a moment where I thought, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And then I went through the ranks on the officer level, because we have different ranks for fire officers in Belgium. We still have the military ranks in our country. So I started as a lieutenant, then a second lieutenant, or as a second lieutenant, then a lieutenant, then a captain. But it's not the same as in the US, the ranks. So if you're a captain in Belgium, I think it's more like a battalion chief in the US. So it's really different, the names of the ranks. But then the first step I took was becoming responsible for a certain part of Antwerp. I became responsible for the metropolitan area. We also had responsible for the suburban area, and then responsible for the port of Antwerp. And so I became responsible for the city area. And then after that, there was a pivotal moment in my career in 2015. And in 2015, there was new legislation in Belgium where we transferred from municipal fire services to regional fire services. And my job was to do the transformation, change management for the transformation of the city fire service of Antwerp to the regional fire service. Yeah. In operational terms, there was not that big of a difference, but in organization terms, in how you're organized and what responsibilities you have as a fire service, this was a major difference. So it was a very complex change where a lot of politicians were involved, where we had to work with the city management, we had to work with all of these different parties, we had to look in a very broad way at the organization. I had to look at finances, I had to look at HR, I had to look at all these different processes that had to run very well. That was my first experience with the leadership of the whole organization. And that really was a pivotal moment for me, because then I thought, okay, the former chief was going to retire 2 years after, in 2017, and I thought, okay, but if you have done this change management, maybe it's time for you to step up and take a shot at leading the organization. And so that was a moment where I decided to go for the leadership, to become the chief fire officer. And so 2 years later, the former fire chief went on retirement, and I decided to apply for the job, and got the job based on a management plan that was very innovative, proactive, was looking at new ways of using technology, new ways of organizing the fire service in order to get as much return of the funds and the means we had to serve our city and our community. And so that's how I became the fire chief. And then, like you said, almost I think almost 8 years later, I'm still the fire chief. And time flies when you're having fun.
That's true. That's true. So you mentioned the funding as part of that conversation. What an incredible, I would call it maybe the equivalent here in the States of a consolidation, multiple fire departments into one. And there are in the state of Colorado, there are several departments we're a municipal department here, but there are several around us that have consolidated small municipal departments into large regional, not probably to the scope of yours, but did that change your funding mechanism? My assumption is that as a municipal fire department, your revenue came from local taxes, whatever that might be. Yeah. How did that shift your fund? Is that a correct assumption? And then how did that change as you moved into the regionalization project?
Yeah, we have two major financial flows. That's on the one hand, contributions from the communities that are a member of the fire region. And so there's a legal obligation in Belgium to be a member of a fire region. So every community has to be a member, and they have to contribute based on a certain it's a mathematical equation that they make to determine how much you have to pay to the fire service. And then the second revenue stream is from the federal government. So we have a revenue stream from the federal government. And at this moment, it's about 80% of the funds are coming from communities and 20% from the federal government. The difference, the main difference, I think, is the distance between the taxpayer and the fire service. When you're a municipal fire service, you're directly in the budgets of the city or the community you're working in. So they get the taxpayers' money, and then you're one of the services that they directly pay with it. Now we are being subsidized by the community. So there's like one step between. And the governance of the fire service is completely different. So the decision making is a bit further from the municipal level, and so is a bit further from the taxpayer. That's on the one hand very interesting from the position of a fire chief, because you have less people to how we call it, to prove that you're worth the money, or to prove your actions to. But on the other hand, being directly responsible to your taxpayers is also a very interesting position to be in, because you get more trust and more buy-in from the public. It's more easy to get it. For us, it's a bit further, and it's more difficult to prove that you're worth your money.
And you're serving what size population out of how many personnel? How many personnel do you have that are serving what size population?
Our population is about 600,000 inhabitants in our region, and we have about 850 staff, 750 full professional firefighters, and then management staff of about 100 people. That's about the amount of people we work with.
Great. Yeah. And so I had this a little bit later in the conversation, but you gave me just a great lead into it, which is really about the relationship between the fire service and your customers, for lack of a better, the community that you're charged to care for. And their smaller communities can tend to have a little bit better ability to connect with their community at a more of what feels like a personal level. But when you get into these metropolitan fire departments, we're about 400,000, and I've got about 500 staff. Mm-hmm. It becomes more difficult the larger you get to stay connected. So what is that relationship like between your members, your department, and the community that you care for now?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. And maybe to give some context, most of the fire regions in Belgium are very dependent on voluntary firefighters. We have about 80% volunteers, 20% full professional. And so most of them are very depending on volunteers. And if you want to get volunteers to your fire station, if you want them to apply, then you need to be very close to the community. Because like I said, like I started when I was 18 years old, I wanted to become a firefighter, but the reason was I want to do something for the community. And that's the reason why people join the fire service, and certainly join as a voluntary firefighter or a part-time firefighter, whatever structure you're in. So I think it's extremely important as a fire service to be very close to the community. For a big metropolitan area, it's maybe a bit different, but still you need to have the trust of the public. And it's becoming more and more difficult. Our European cities are becoming very diverse, and that's I think is a good thing. But it means that you have a different relationship with your the relationship with the public changes, and not everybody looks in the same way at a fire service. Not everybody looks in the same way at government as a whole, and not everybody has trust in the government. For example, we have a lot of refugees in Europe, and some of them come from countries that have a very bad relationship with government and with every government service. So you have to take that into account when you're working as a fire service. And we see that it's becoming more and more difficult to gain the trust of certain communities within our city. In general, trust is very high. We measure this. We do together with the city. We have reviews on how is the trust of the fire service, how is our perceived service, and so on. And it's extremely good. It's one of the best. We are in all of these reviews, we are the best. But you see that there is a certain amount of people that don't trust the fire service. And so for us also, it's very important to look into that and try to connect with these people. Because we see on the other side that in European cities, there's also an augmentation of violence against fire service. It used to be mainly violence against the police and against EMT. And often EMT, the violence in EMT is often also related to the pathology and so on. But violence against fire service was very rare in the past. And we see more and more violence against fire service. And in our opinion, it's related to this trust and to this trust in government as a whole, trust in a service that wears a uniform. And so we see a negative effect there of the lack of trust in certain communities within our city. So that's a very important thing, I think. And so we try to tackle that by working on recruitment of people within these communities, because I really believe that if you recruit people from a certain background, then that's the best way to convince them that you can be trusted and to have a look inside. We also do a lot of communications, but it's a very slow process to build trust. We have a saying that says trust goes away on the horseback and comes on foot. So building trust is something very difficult, but it's the basis for the work for your work as a fire service.
Agreed. And yeah, our saying here is that you can you earn it in drops and lose it in buckets.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one.
And it's completely true, and really interesting that you're challenged with that, and we're seeing some of the same here to a higher extent. In fact, to the point that we've started tracking violence against our first responders to try and figure out if the data aligns or where the violence is being targeted at apparatus or personnel or things like that, and looking at safety measures. In fact, one of the FEU seminars on violence against first responders, I think it was the fire chief of Dublin, who was talking about some riots that they had there, and gave us some ideas about different ways that we could try and protect our firefighters as they're going into communities that perhaps don't value them as neighbors helping neighbors, which is really what this whole industry is about.
By coincidence, there was a very recent research being done in Belgium where we saw that based on self-reporting, so it's not completely clear picture, but based on self-reporting, about 90% of our firefighters, EMT staff, and staff in urgent medical care in hospitals had to deal with aggression on a yearly basis. So 90% of them, at least once a year, have to deal with aggression, and that's a figure that's really incredible.
I agree. So you, let's talk a little bit about calls, and then we'll move into how you staff that. My assumption, right, my bias is that there are probably quite a few similarities between urban centers in Europe, commerce, right? So the port, airports, things like that there are probably some overlapping risks. But I'm curious about when it comes to you guys, what are the dominant types of calls that your department is responding to, and how are you adapting to the existing risk with the regionalization? How are you adapting to emerging risks or changing risk profiles? And we can talk about it if it applies to around medical response and around the social safety nets, right? That we see a lot of impact on the fire and EMS service in the States from social issues, right? So access to healthcare, access to transportation, things like that. So I'm just curious, the dominant call types, how are you adapting to those risks, and what are emerging that you're seeing?
Okay. A lot of things to talk about at once. So let's just start with the general overview of the call types, and I think that's a similarity in almost all the world, that fire service does a lot more than putting out fires. I think that's one of the main similarities, that we mean a lot more for community than just putting out fires. And I think, as a side note, that is one of the public relation tasks we have to do as a chief fire officer, making sure that all our community and also the decision makers in the community know very well what you're doing and why you're so important for the community. So also in our country, and I think in all of Europe, we put out fires, but it's a small, or it's not a major type of incidents we deal with. In Belgium, at least it's the case if you're doing EMT, because not every fire region does EMT or has ambulances. If you're doing EMT, that's your major call-out type. That's the main one. We see in Belgium that about 80% of the calls the fire service gets is for EMT and ambulances. We do about 65% of all the ambulances in Belgium are being driven by firefighters, so are being done by fire regions. So that's a lot of calls, and I think it's about 80%. What we don't have in Belgium, and that's different all over Europe because it's very typical for our country. We don't have a system where you do EMT with the fire truck, like going for CPR, for example, going out with the fire truck and assisting the ambulances. That's something we don't do in Belgium. So we don't have that system, even though I think it's a very good system for example, for heart attacks, where you just need the first responder that can help to be there. And I think the fire service, it's a good thing if they're part of it, but it's not the case in Belgium. It is the case in some other European countries, like in some parts of the Netherlands, they do have that system. But we do have a lot of the ambulances, and we have a very dense network of ambulances. So we do have a very fast system of ambulances that we take part of as a fire service. Next to that, if you look at the fire incidents for themselves, most of the calls we get are technical interventions, and I call this problem solving. So a lot of the calls we get are urgent problems where people really can't find another solution for it very quickly. And it can be, oftentimes it's something very small where people are just in they're in distress or they have a problem and they don't know who to call, and then they call the fire service. That's a lot of calls, and our policy is to answer all those calls. So we make a point out of it. If you call us, we come. We're there. We are very fast. We come and help you. But we can't solve the whole problem. For example, if there's a storm and the part of your roof is gone, then we maybe put some plastic on the roof and we make sure that it doesn't rain inside your house, but we don't fix your roof. That's where we put a limit, of course. But a lot of our calls are just this, and I often give this example to my policymakers. On a Saturday evening, there was a person driving with an electric wheelchair in a certain area in Antwerp, and this person had a flat tire. Who are you going to call on that moment? The police, or maybe I don't know, roadside support or something like that. Oftentimes, people call the fire service, and then you can do two things. You can say it's not my job, and I think that would be a correct answer because it's not the job of the fire service. Or you can say, okay, we have the staffing, we don't have a large incident at the moment. There's really no problem just to send the technical crew and help this guy out. And this is something we do for the community. And I think that's one of the reasons why we build so much trust and people are so happy about the work we do, because we do a lot of these small things and just help people out. That's I think is very important. So those types of interventions, from very small but also they can be extremely big and large, are a lot of our interventions. And then of course we put out fires. That's something we also do. But I think in Antwerp about 15% of our calls is fire, and then the rest is something else. But if we're talking about the fire incidents, but because it's also something you refer to, the risks in the city, are they similar? We are working in a city that has a medieval background. So the city of Antwerp, the ancient center of the city is from medieval times, and it was the main growth of Antwerp was in the Renaissance. So we have a lot of very valuable buildings, but we also have a lot of these very narrow streets. You don't have these straight line streets in the city of Antwerp. So we have a lot of combustible material very close together. So when we get a call for a fire in the city, we always go out from the worst case scenario, and so we send a lot of equipment in. A normal fire in Belgium, we send one fire engine, a ladder, and somebody from the rank of a battalion chief. If we have a fire in Antwerp, we always send two engines. We send one or two ladders. We send a technical crew because we have a lot of problems with reaching the fire. I think you can compare to something like a squad. And then we send also a fire officer. So we tend to send more to the incidents because of this very typical situation in the city center of Antwerp, where we have a lot of buildings very close together. The buildings are very difficult to reach. You have a lot of buildings where the roof structure, for example, goes from the one building to the other. It's all interconnected, and so the risk of having an escalation from a small fire escalating and becoming a big fire, setting different buildings on fire, is very big in our city. So we have to take into account when we determine the staffing levels and the way we approach a fire. And so that's something we do in our when we make our risk assessments. We try to determine, okay, where are the hotspots, what are the typical risks we have to deal with, and that's how we build up our fire service and then try to put the equipment, the apparatus, the staff on the right positions.
So let's talk a little bit about what you use to do that work, right? So again, a lot of similarities. I think it's really interesting to hear the technical assistance calls, right? Because some folks in the fire service really love that piece of their work, right? They recognize the foundation of why we're here is really just to help our neighbors, right? Whatever that looks like, and in the moment where they can help themselves. And there's varying responses to that, right? Some people are, consider themselves too important to help out in those circumstances. Yeah. Other people gain a lot of energy. But let's talk about your people, and then let's talk about the hardware, so the equipment, the apparatus that you use to do that. And so it's a really long question because that's just what I do. So I apologize. But
no problem.
But how is it you develop your people? What does their training look like to prepare them for this all hazards response? And then on the apparatus side, right? So these are the two things that we use to do our work. On the apparatus side, you talked about the development of Antwerp being in medieval times, and which means that no planning department was looking at road widths for these big fire trucks that we have here in the U.S. So you have to build your infrastructure, your response apparatus around the community, as opposed to building your community around the fire apparatus. So let's talk about the training and professional development, and then let's talk about the equipment that you have to respond, and then how you staff that.
Okay. So one of the things I didn't mention in the beginning is we have this regionalized fire service in Belgium. So we build up everything from the municipalities, and the mayor in a municipality has a very important role in safeguarding the community. They work together in a fire region to have a larger fire region that is able to deal with theoretically all the risks in the communities that are part of the fire region. But then we also have a federal level that has a responsibility for organizing and making sure there's legislation, but they also have a role in standardization. And one of the ways to standardize our approach to fire is by the training and the upbringing of firefighters. So we have a very standardized training curriculum on all the levels of the firefighters we have. So if you enter the fire service, whether it's as a voluntary part-time firefighter, a full professional firefighter, you go to a school, a provincial school that is funded by the government, and you follow a standardized program based on a curriculum of the federal government. The curriculum is determined together with the sector. So we have determined together with the federal government what does a firefighter need to be able to do. And all the firefighters in Belgium are trained on that same curriculum. In certain areas, like in Antwerp, we add a lot to that. So we add a lot of additional training to that, but that's something we choose for ourselves. We also paid for ourselves. And so standard training in Belgium, I think, is about 270 hours for a firefighter, for a basic firefighter. And I think we have a half-year full-time program in Antwerp to become a firefighter in Antwerp. But that's because we have different risks from the rest of Belgium because of our specific situation. So every service, mainly in the major cities, adds a lot to this basic training. Next to that basic training, you can do two things. You can follow training to become a specialized firefighter. For example, you can train in CBRN. You can train in rope rescue. You can train in everything we do as a fire service. Those are specialized trainings, and they are also standardized. Or you can choose to, or you can do both. You can choose to train to become to rise in the ranks and become a sub officer, an officer, and just follow the trainings. And also, all of these trainings are standardized and are the same for everybody. You follow the training in the provincial school up to the level of sub-officer. So once you want to become an officer, you go to a centralized training on a federal level. Often this is also in one of the schools that is taking the responsibility for this education, but you have one education. And that's a good thing because then everybody who wants to become a fire officer comes together in one classroom we are not that big of a country. We have about 11 million inhabitants, so you can make every year one classroom of new fire officers. So that also creates, like the exchange between the different regions, because there you meet people from all the different regions all over the country, and you get to know the difference. That even in the standardized system, there are a lot of difference between the regions. So that's how we train our fire crews. What we also have is you can do the specialization on different levels. So, for example, when you're specialized in CBRN, you can follow an advanced course on a sub-officer level. You can follow a post university degree on an officer level in this CBRN matter. So we have on different levels. You can follow specialization, or you can advance your career in a hierarchical position. So that's how our training is organized. In my opinion, our provincial schools are very valuable because they tend to centralize a lot of the knowledge from the fire regions in the province. For example, in Antwerp, you have five fire regions in the province and then one school, and so the teachers in the school are also people who work part-time or whatever in the different fire regions. So they're people that come from the field. They have practical experience, and so that gives a good exchange between developing new knowledge, teaching the new knowledge, bringing that into practice, testing the new knowledge into practice, so that. And also your trainers are still active firefighters, so they know what they're talking about. And I think that's important. So I'm quite happy at the moment about our education system. I think it's on a good level. But of course, like everywhere, there are still some problems. And I think the main problem is the lack of the integration of science in our education program. In some European countries, there's a presence of real fire service university, by lack of a better name. For example, in the Netherlands, they have this. In France, in Poland, there are different countries where they have this higher education institute that is very directly connected to the fire service. And in my opinion, that's a huge benefit, because then you can do your own research, but you also have people who are on the lookout to all the research that is being done abroad on fire and on our work, and then you get more integration between education and science. I think that's something we still have to evolve in order to have even better training for our people.
It's great. It's interesting because in parts of the U.S., right, there's a belief that, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term blue collar work, right? But blue collar work is, very with your hands, right, here in the U.S. And there's a sense that's all that the fire service is, and that there isn't a need to kind of go into a higher education and start learning the science behind it or what have you. So it's interesting to see that that's happening in various places throughout Europe. Let's shift over to the other component.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Alec, but that's one of my missions, to make sure that people, and mainly on the higher levels of government and on the decision makers' part, because I know those are the ones you have to convince. I really try to convince them that fire service leadership and fire service management is real management, is real leadership, and even very strong leadership. And there's a lot to learn from the fire service on how to manage frontline services. And I think it's a general belief from me that frontline services are much more complex to manage and are extremely important for society and for the trust in government and so on. And I think that leadership in our type of organization is very underestimated. And so I know that this vision exists, that fire service is just blue collar work, and I think a lot that we do is actually very technical, very innovative, and frontline work is extremely important for trust in government. So I think we are really underestimated. And that's one of my personal missions, is to convince other government managers that we really have strong leadership within our organization, that we are very important as an organization for society. So that's just something I wanted to add to that.
No, that's great. And I mean, I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. I often talk to candidates who are interested in promoting, and I talk about there being three sort of legs to the stool of a balanced candidate who's rising up through the ranks. And it is experience, right? Experience matters. It is technical training, but there's also that formal education component where you start talking about managing human resources and communications and politics and public sector budgeting and all of these different things that become part of your job. And if they're not immediately part of your job, they're important for you to understand, right? Because you're leading people who need to understand how they fit into the bigger picture, how they fit into the community. And a lot of times those skill sets aren't taught in the technical training programs. They're taught at the university level, and it does present a much more balanced candidate. I'm glad you're championing that work, and really it speaks to what was in your bio, right, about how you're looking to incorporate a lot of advancements into the fire service. Let's talk about the equipment if we can, just real quick, and then we're going to move into a couple of bigger picture items around the changing environment. But apparatus, right? You have to build your fire trucks to fit in your city, as opposed to building your city to fit your fire trucks. And so, roads that were built for horses and carriages and people walking around are now having to have fire suppression equipment run through them. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then how you staff them. You mentioned something during your structural response that you actually send a little bit more equipment than perhaps some of your neighboring provinces or countries do. They might send one pumper and one ladder truck, and you're sending two and two potentially, and a technical team and all that. So, the equipment, what types do you have, and then how do you staff those?
Yeah. First of all, I think that's having traveled a lot to the US and Canada. I think that's one of the major differences, the look and feel of our fire trucks. And I really like the American trucks, but it just wouldn't work in a city like Antwerp, because you couldn't take the turn in most of the streets. So yeah, that's a major difference, as our fire trucks are much smaller, even though they are still too big for the city. So that's one of the discussions we have at the moment, is how are we going to organize for even further change that is happening right now, because everybody wants streets to be as nobody wants traffic within the streets. You have the example of Paris, where they made like a 50-minute city, where almost all of the streets are free of traffic, and so how do you deal with that as a fire service? And we see the same in Belgium, where a lot of the cities are being reinvented. We focus a lot on pedestrians, on cyclists, and not on cars anymore. And so that's really a change that is happening right now. So we had the difficulty of having very narrow streets, but they were drivable, and now they're making the streets not drivable anymore. So that's a question for us. Also for garbage management, also for ambulances, also for the police. So it's a difficult problem we are facing. And so one of the problems we have is we have a standard pumper in Belgium, and it's a multifunctional pumper. It's a basic fire truck we have. So it's a fire truck. There are always 6 people inside: a sub officer, a driver, and 4 firefighters. And it's able to do actually all of the work we have to do on a basic level, whether it's firefighting, CBRN, EMT, water rescue. It's equipped for all of the tasks we have to do on a basic level. So that's our workhorse. But if you want to achieve this fire truck to be able to do everything you need to do, contain a little bit of water, have 6 firefighters inside, then you still get a large fire truck. And we see at the moment that for the city center in most of our European cities, this type of fire truck is becoming too big. And so we are now questioning, okay, do we have to buy smaller fire trucks? Do we have to put like 2 fire trucks in one station with like 3 people in every fire truck? Is that a better option, or what other type of solution do we have to find for that? Because that's actually the difficulty. And also maybe in the suburban area, you still can use that fire truck, but in the city center not. And that takes away a lot of the standardization that you have in your fire trucks. And I think one of the strengths we have at the moment is the standardization of this basic fire truck. It also helps with building the fire truck. For the manufacturers, it's more easy to build it, so you can have them to build more fire trucks faster and so on. So the standardization is a benefit. If you want to have different types of fire trucks, okay, then you take away a lot of standardization, and also for the organization of your fire service, that's difficult. So then I have to deal with having this one team that is driving 2 fire trucks, maybe in separate teams, or is driving a smaller fire truck that is not able to do all of the tasks that my other fire trucks are able to. So that's a headbreaker for us at the moment. It causes a lot of headache. Next to that, we also have these ladder trucks. They're typically with a 30-meter ladder, and they have 3 main tasks: a rescue of people that are on a high level in the building, fire extinguishing, but also imagery. So we used to use the fire truck a lot to if you have smoke somewhere, you drive in the vicinity of the area where the smoke is. You put the ladder up, and you can see where it is. See above the roofs of this very dense city. So these are the 3 tasks. But also there, to have a 30-meter ladder in the center of a city, you need a big fire truck. So also there, a lot of innovation is needed to still have this ladder in the center. And for example, there we are experimenting with drone teams that we are combining with these ladder trucks. So our drone teams are integrated with these ladder trucks because of this basic tasking that we said, okay, imagery is one of your tasks, so you can do this by putting up your ladder, but you can also do this by putting up a drone. And so we can do more with this fire truck in the center of the city. And then we also have technical cars. We have a lot of them, and very typically for us, we also have a lot of industrial equipment because that's also something in Europe. A lot of times, we have. I think, I don't know whether it's completely true, but I think we have a little bit bigger responsibility towards industrial sites than what I see in other parts of the world and also the US. We are really responsible when there's a fire in an industrial, so in the port of Antwerp, in the very big industrial sites, we are still responsible for firefighting over there. Some of them have their own fire crews, but if there's an escalated incident, we still get called and have to coordinate and have to manage the incident. So we have also a lot of equipment that is very specialized for the port of Antwerp, and we have a separate. It's not separate, it's integrated in the organization, but we also have an organization for dealing, specific organization for dealing with these industrial fires. So that's a bit the situation in our country. And the standardized fire truck is something I see a lot in Europe. It's in a lot of countries, it's a bit the same.
Thank you for that. I be curious to talk to you in a couple of years after you've started to experiment with some of these different designs, and I can see how that can cause a problem. Obviously, standardization really helps. I don't know if you have to move people around to fill in for vacations and leave and things, or people who are out sick.
Yeah.
But that standardization really lets them integrate well with the team.
Yeah.
But if you have this incredibly complex community where the risks are different in each area of the city, then there could be an argument made, or the challenges, right? The barriers to you moving around are different in each part of the city. It can be a challenge to have that one size fits all kind of an approach. I want to shift a little bit away from the response and into prevention, because your community has some buildings that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. Obviously, building codes have changed and over the years, and I would guess that, like in the U.S., prevention or risk reduction strategies are a really important part of what you do, because a fire that's prevented is, property that's not damaged and lives that weren't at risk, including those of our firefighters. But what are you doing around prevention and community risk reduction, and how do you integrate those approaches into your day-to-day operations?
Yeah. You're completely right. We have a very dense and old building stock, so fire prevention is not always easy. We have very clear fire prevention codes, also from the federal level, that are integrated in legislation for new buildings. So in terms of new buildings, I think we have a rather strong prevention culture where if you want to get a license to build your new building, you have to go through a procedure, and you have to pass the fire service inspections. And that brought us the last decades, because it was integrated in legislation after a very big fire in Brussels in the 60s of the last century. I think there were 300 people killed in that fire. So it was really the start of structured fire prevention in Belgium. And so since then, we have this culture of checking every building before it's being built, whether it's okay with legislation, whether it's conform, and also inspecting it after it's being built to make sure that it's according to the standards. So I think that's a good thing. But the difficulty always comes with these ancient buildings and these old buildings that are being renovated, and then it's more gray area. There's no clear legislation, and it's also not possible to make clear legislation, because if you don't want these old buildings, if you want them perfectly fire safe, then you have to tear them down, and that's something you don't do in such a city. So it's always our basic approach is we go and sit down with the project developers, with the architects, and also often with the people who are responsible for the monument care. So you have a service in the city, but also a regional service for monuments that is responsible for taking care that this heritage is being preserved. And so we sit together with them, and we have like these meetings where we talk about, okay, how are we going to reach as much as possible of the goals of everybody at the table. For example, somebody wants to create a new hotel in an ancient building in the center of Antwerp. This person who wants to build the hotel wants to have as many rooms as possible, and so on. The people from the cultural heritage, they want as little as possible change to the building, and we want fire safe building, and maybe there are even other parties who have different goals. So the thing is to sit together and try to achieve as much of the goals as possible, without making the project impossible or not economically viable. And that's something you do in a discussion. So this is one of the basics we have in our fire prevention strategy, is to have these types of conversations with all the people that are involved in the project. We started doing this for buildings. Now we also do this for complex industrial projects, where you have the same problem. If somebody wants to build a new ethylene cracker in the port of Antwerp, it's something that's being done maybe once a year, once every 5 years somewhere in the world. So you have to bring a lot of knowledge together, and you have to talk to a lot of people, and just almost build a fire safety philosophy on this project. How are we going to do this? How are we going to measure whether we're still on the right path? And we also do this at this moment in city development. So in our city planning, if they want to adapt streets, we also sit together with all the services, because some of the services look at traffic safety, others look at maybe have more trees in the streets. We look at can our fire trucks still pass and so on. So it's always comes down to sitting together with the different services and having a discussion and trying to create a strategy that is reaching as much of the goals as possible in the project you have. So that's a basic approach we have, and that leads us to a lot of success because we used to have a lot of discussions with politicians, and we used to have the reputation of making projects impossible, and that's something you don't want as a fire service, because maybe you're right and you have a point, or you have legislation behind you. But if you're always looked at the one that's making projects impossible, people are trying to find ways to go around you. And we had this in some of the very big projects in Antwerp. And our experience is, if you're too strict and if you don't communicate, that leads to having buildings that are less fire safe than having this strategy where you're sitting together and maybe make some deals, give in a little bit on certain areas because it means a lot to the other party, and then you end up with a building that is much more fire safe than when you're not consulted, or people try to go around you. So that's very basic in our strategy. I don't know whether that answers
it absolutely does. At the community level, so when you talk about that's development, that kind of thing. How are you integrating with individual residences? So these are commercial and developers and industrial settings. Do you also have touch points with the individual communities and single family homes and things like that, where you're providing some risk reduction and prevention education as well?
Yeah, we about 10 years ago, we started this, and we asked ourselves, where are we going to have the most impact? Because you can go to every individual house, and I know some services in Europe that are doing this, and I think it's great. It's really impressive if you can go as a fire service to every individual house and maybe put up a smoke detector or something like that. But it really depends on, in my opinion, it depends on is it the social organization in your country? Because in some countries, there are, like in Belgium, there are a lot of other organizations that are also going to people's houses, like well-being organizations that are also visiting the houses. And when we start making our strategy on community risk reduction, we said maybe it's a better strategy in our specific situation. It's not something that you can easily translate to others. In our specific situation, to work together with these other organizations that are already inside the people's houses, like caretaker organizations, but also working together with schools. So our strategy is a lot focused on working with intermediate organizations. And for example, we work together with the schooling system, so that we make sure that we have about 70 or 80% of the students in Antwerp. They visit the fire service, but not to look at the red cars, but to have like a small training program on how to call the 112, your 911, how to deal with a fire truck that is going to traffic when you're riding on your bike to make it more safe. How to extinguish a small fire, how to evacuate when there's smoke. So these small lessons, they get in advance, they get a program at school, learning a little bit about it, and they visit the fire service for half a day, and they learn more about it. So that's how we try to reach as many people as possible. So we use this intermediate strategy and not go to the individual houses.
That's great. You're leveraging that force multiplier, right, through people who are already there and providing curriculum and those kinds of things that help spread the word. That's great. Great partnerships. When I came out to the FEU's ODP program, there's a lot of discussion about the circular and environmental considerations, right? And it was the first time that I'd heard about that, almost adapted in my own mind. The 3 priorities that I was always taught was life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. And attending that program really added a 4th for my consideration, which is environmental impact, right? Environmental considerations around the let it burn strategy, and insurance will get it, or the amount of water we apply and the runoff we create. those kinds of things that at least had to be in the back of your mind. So, that was relatively new consideration for me. So are there technologies, sustainability practices, or innovations that you've adopted in your fire brigade that you think U.S. fire departments should be paying attention to, not just around the sustainability piece, but really around integrating technology or environmental considerations, any of that you really think that perhaps not to be judgy, but perhaps we're missing the boat on some of these things that you observe when you come out here to visit?
One of the interesting collaborations that we have set up over the last years is with city planning, certainly looking at these environmental impacts caused by climate change, or these interventions caused by climate change. Because we see Antwerp is a city that is lying below sea level. So we have a lot of impact from some of the events we see at the moment. In Europe, we have a lot of problems with, on the one hand, rising temperatures, drought that is being caused by it, but on the other hand, more extreme weather events like storms and so on. And so we have a lot of impact from this, and I always call it that sometimes you have too much rain, and then you have a long period of no rain, and how to deal with that. So we're sitting together with city planning, and they also have the same problem because they have to be able to collect a lot of water at certain moments, and then their goal is to keep the water, to keep as much of the water as possible for periods when you have drought, so that you can reuse the water for your community. So that was one of the challenges they had. And so we sat together with them and made sure that they have, I think, 17 places in the city where they have created very large buffer capacities in order to deal with this problem of buffering a lot of the water, capturing a lot of the water that is being that falls during these big storms. But they don't let it just flow away, because you can just build a bigger sewage system and make sure the water is gone, but they try to capture it. And we work together with them to make sure that these water buffers are also reachable for us, so that we can put pumps inside or get the water out. Because at certain moments when you have drought, it's also very difficult to get enough water to extinguish the fire. So that's how we reached a win-win situation together with city planning, again by proactive sharing of information with each other and making sure that there was a network also already available. And I think, in my opinion, that is an example of something that is, in my opinion, lacking in the fire service globally. That is our attention to and our ability for networking with a lot of different services that are maybe on first sight not related to the fire service. And I really believe in this weak ties theory, where you say, okay, you have to build a lot of weak ties with other organizations, make sure that you know them, that you are acquainted with what they do, in order. And sometimes, from time to time, you never know when exactly that moment is. You get a benefit from one of the weak ties you have. Maybe not directly, but because you know somebody who works in a certain field, you get a solution for one of the problems you're having. And that's something I believe the fire service in general should invest much more in connecting with all these other organizations. Even if they seemingly have nothing to do with your core business. And that's how we set up a lot of these more innovative solutions that we have. I also see this in a technological realm. In my opinion, it's very important to be connected with like the startup community in your city. A lot of cities have these startup hubs. There are these organizations that are so interesting. They have solutions for problems that we didn't know of. that we didn't even know they existed. So we try to have these connections with all of these organizations, and so we see that, for example, if we want to for training our drone teams, for example, we could work together with some of the startups in our community because they have a lot of experience in flying drones. If we want to go to autonomous robots, we see that there are startups that are dealing with that problem. So, in my opinion, it's very important that the fire service to just be very broadly connected, and that's one of the lessons. Maybe not for the U.S. Fire Service because you're very diverse, and I know some of you are very well connected. But just in general, I see that a lot of colleagues are not paying a lot of attention to networking and connecting. Maybe they do within the fire service, but not connecting with like a whole network of different organizations around them.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we'll operate like we're the only game in town, right?
Yeah.
We put up the walls around our organization and fail perhaps to recognize how interconnected all of our work is with the community. We're bumping up against the end of our time, and so I've got a last question that I'm sort of combining here because I'd like to hear from your perspective. That what are some of the biggest challenges in your perception that are facing the global fire service today? How are you approaching that, or what are you thinking about related to that? And then I'll combine that with another question, which is, what's your advice to fire chiefs around the world related to the work that we're doing or some of these really big challenges that we're getting ready to face?
Yeah. When I was thinking about the interview, that was one of the toughest questions to answer. But I think I can summarize it. The main challenge in increasing call complexity. I think our calls are becoming ever more complex. We have to deal with a lot of problems at the same time. Like we talked about the aggression problem. It's always, you always still have your basic intervention. For example, you get called for a fire. It's a complex fire in a complex city. And then suddenly you also have to deal with aggression. You have to deal with some new technological problems, like maybe there are batteries inside, maybe there's a home battery inside. And so you get a combination of different challenges at the same time. And so I think that puts a lot of mental stress and mental burden on our people. And also sometimes these are conflicting problems, so that if you're doing the right thing for one of the problems, maybe you're doing the wrong thing for another part of the problem. And I think this increasing complexity puts a lot of stress on our whole organization. It puts a lot of stress on the technology you need to use, on the training of your people, on the recruitment, what type of people are you looking for, but also on the current staff, and their mental health is affected by it. I think this is, in my opinion, the summary of the challenge that is similar all over the world. Wherever I come, I hear about this. This is my summary of everything I hear around the world, whether it's in Europe in the FEU or whether it's in the Metro Fire Chiefs. I think that's what I see. So increasing call complexity, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Bert, anything else? I mean, we have, it's a rare opportunity for us to get to chat, and I know we're in very, very different time zones, and it's afternoon for you and morning for me. So pulling this together is always a challenge. So I don't want to miss anything, and I would just like to hear if there's anything else that you can think of that we didn't get a chance to talk about that perhaps we should have discussed.
Maybe just to end, I think. I'm always happy to go to the US and join the Metro Fire Chiefs, and I think we talked about the mental health And for me, this is going to the US and to the Metro Fire Chiefs is for me like a mental health program, personal mental health program. And I just wanted to give, I just wanted to mention that that in my opinion, we should do this. We should do this more, and we should also do this in Europe. But I still want to come to the US a lot of times. Just be together with chiefs and talk about all of these problems is really very good stress relief. Talking about the challenges we have, seeing that everybody has similar problems. I was last Metro Fire Chiefs conference that I attended. We talked about the problems with apparatus. We have the same in Europe. We talked about mental health. We talked about cardiovascular diseases. We have the same problems. We are working on mental and physical fitness programs. We can share this with each other, and I think this is very important. And maybe looking a bit at ourselves as fire chiefs, I think it's very important to communicate with peers, to talk a lot to each other, to make sure that we can cope with the stress. And I think these types of initiatives where you have a podcast aimed at and made by fire chiefs is really great, and it's a leading example. So thank you very much for doing this. I think it's very important for us fire chiefs.
Absolutely, Bert. Thank you. And it wouldn't be just be me talking to myself. It wasn't for people like you who come in here and share your insight and share the innovations and what you're doing, and really confirm that we're more alike than we are different. And I think that's really important. The fire service, I think, is leading the way in a lot of ways right now in real and meaningful international conversations and celebrating what we have in common, and specifically our common purpose around caring for our communities and our members, right, who are then going out and doing the work online. So I'm super grateful for you being here and being part of this, and hopefully getting ready to close up your office and turn off the lights and go home and see your family. But it has been great hearing about your organization, which sounds incredible. And thank you for what you could share about your neighbors as well. You know, I think it's interesting to hear how many differences there are just in the countries that surround you. But we, the collective, anybody who listens to this, definitely, I'll speak for them and say we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's episode of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Leadership Development Podcast. And if you made it this far, thanks for taking the time to listen and sticking with us. This series is created by Metro Chiefs for Metro Chiefs. But as we've seen today, the lessons we talk about here apply to leaders at every level across departments of all sizes, both here in the U.S. and all around the world. If you enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with anyone who you think might be interested in hearing the content. If you have ideas for topics that we should cover in the future, please send us an email and we'll get after it. Stay safe, stay innovative, and until next time, please continue to live out the Metro vision of being a place to belong, inspiring success. Have a great day.